Hey everyone, and welcome to today's midweek update. And so today we are doing our Q&A session. I had quite a few questions from you guys, so we're going to get through as many as we can, and we're going to try and do so in about 10-15 minutes. So let's kick off with our first question. Okay, so our first question is from Stephen Jones, and he asks, what started you doing the salvage projects? Well, it was by accident really. I bought a couple of years back an Audi TT, a VR6, which I always wanted, and I was gonna do a channel just based on me doing that car up and getting it up to show car condition, but the car was a categorized car. I didn't really know this until I was selling the car, and then I looked at the logbook and saw this categorization. So I've not always known about category cars, and I just figured, well, actually I'm gonna have to sell this cheaper than what I bought it for. And then it got me starting thinking, well, actually there's a lot of cars I would love to get, but they are quite expensive. So what if I bought a categorized car and then did them up? And that's how it all began. So when I sold the TT, I got my white TT, the Mark II, and that was a stolen recovered car from Copart, and the rest is history. Okay, so the next question is from Kiri Mendez, and they ask, what cars are the best to start with, and also how much money do you need to start? Now that's a very good question. The best cars to start with are category N cars. And why? Because they have quite light damage. How much money you need will depend on the car. But as a rule of thumbs, if this is anything to go by, salvage cars are worth less than a third in value than their straight counterparts. And that third in value is once you've repaired the car. So if you work backward from that, let's say a car is worth £3,000, that means repaired, that car is going to be worth around £2,000, which means that if you want to come in on budget, it means that you need to buy the car for less than £2,000. And that's the way that I normally work back. So I look and see how much cars are selling for from a salvage point of view, and then I work back and say, well, actually, to repair said car, so you need to look at the car and assess the damage. And one of the good ways I found is look at the damage, then look for parts on eBay and then total it all up. It's going to be a rough estimate, but at least you're going to get some kind of idea of what it's going to cost you to repair the car. And then you look at the value of the car or the cost of the car in the auction, plus the parts needed, and that's going to set your minimum price or your maximum price that you're going to buy the car for. And don't forget the fees, because the fees always catch people out, so you need to include that in your buying calculations as well. Okay, so this question from the Makataka 69, and he said, are you retired and do the channel for cars for fun, or do you hold down a job as well? I'm not retired. I do hold down a job. I work in the IT industry. So I am a IT manager, and I run a team of engineers who look after the company who I work for, data center, and I also look after the security team as well. So me working on the cars, I do that in the weekends. So I don't really have a lot of time. I have to pack quite a lot in to make sure that those videos are entertaining, and I know that they've been pretty dull of recent dates, but I'm hoping that will change shortly. So that's what I do. So I do all the YouTube videos in the weekend. I have a very understanding wife, but yeah, that's how it works. Okay, Dave Bron asks, how long have you been buying and repairing cars, and what do you do before the videos? I guess I've been buying cars now for about 10 or 12 years. So what I used to do is, when I was younger, you had these cars that you really wanted, but you can never afford when you're younger. And of course now I'm older, those cars are old, but I've always wanted them. So I started buying these old classics. And when I say old classics, I'm talking about 1990s and 2000. So it started off with a Mercedes, call them now, the convertibles. I can't remember what they're called now, not the SLK. So I bought a Mercedes SLK and I always wanted one of those, love those cars. And then after that I sold that, I got a TT, and then I sold that and I got a BMW Z4, and I kept the Z4 for quite some time, so I got that for a real bargain. All of these cars were straight, and then I sold the Z4 just about 2 years ago and then started to buy the salvage cars. So it's all been a hobby really, buying these cars that I wanted to buy, but I've also had a number of company cars as well, so that kind of gave me some kind of stability in my cars and allowed me to buy older cars for a hobby, and I'm still doing it now. Okay, next question is from Lady 600. What video editing software do you use? So I use Final Cut Pro, excellent software. I used to use Adobe Premiere, found that quite difficult to get on with, and then I bought a MacBook when I was on holiday in the US and decided that I'm going to buy Final Cut Pro with the money that I saved buying it in the US, and the rest is history. My camera is a Canon 70D and I have a number of lenses, but I'm going to get a new lens for this camera because the lens I got on here now is a 17 to 55 mil, and if you listen very carefully, hear that noise? That's the lens trying to autofocus. But I'm buying a new STM lens which will make that noise disappear. So if you ever wonder what that rattling noise is, that's the lens fine-tuning for all the movements that I make. I can turn the lens off, but then it tends to go out of focus, so I tolerate that. So now you know. Dean Wood asks the question, do you intend on doing up cars for a living in the future, and what, if any, is your biggest buying regret? Good question. I'd love to do this for a living, but the car market is so hit and miss. You've got to be really good at selling these cars and making a living, and it also depends on what part of the country that you live in as well. So I live in Dorset, and in Dorset people tend to be very wary of cars that are damaged, so it can be difficult to sell them. So in contrast, my Audi sold in a week, and that was quite an expensive car, and I put it up for good money and it sold with no issue. Whereas some of the cars I've had them for 6-7 weeks, and they've been a complete nightmare to sell because of the fact that they are salvage damage. So I guess the closer you are in the middle, if you've got people who come to buy cars tend to travel a 50-mile radius. Anything further than that, then they tend to be put off. When you live on the coast, you really only got a 90 or a 180 degree of a radius for people to come down. So you kind of lost half your market share, which makes it a little bit more challenging to sell them. And my biggest buying regret has to have been the Seat Leon, or the money pit car that I call that, because I sold it at a loss. And the reason why I did that was because I wanted to get another car for the channel, and trying to sell that for a profit, it would have been around for too long. As it was, I had that car up for sale for about 6 weeks before someone bought that, and I spent a lot more money on that car. I learned a valuable lesson when I bought that car, because I bought it sight unseen, and when it came here it had a lot more damage than I actually anticipated, so it cost a lot more to do up. I mean, it virtually had a full paint job on it. Fortunately, the guys at Woodville Stretton gave me a good deal. So that's the only car that I really regretted, and the main reason is because it was a sensible car. It was very practical. It was a diesel, it was a 1.6 eco model. So the kind of people who buy that car are sensible people, and sensible people don't buy salvage cars. So it was a little difficult to move on, but it was a great experience and it gave me a lot of content for the channel. So from that point, it was I guess it was worthwhile. Okay, David Hobbies, his question: what is the first car that you worked on, and what age did you start working on cars? The first car that I worked on in anger was a Alfa Sud 1.3 Ti. Was my greatest car ever. I literally stripped that car from down to the ground to its chassis and then built it back up again, because back in the day Alfa Romeos, they just rusted like anybody, and I wanted this car to look really good, and I did that as a project because at the time I was a young mechanic and I did my apprenticeship as a mechanic, hence the reason why I've been doing cars. And I did my apprenticeship with Ford, Lindsay Baines in Islington, North London. And when I bought my first car, I bought the Alfa, so there's a project car. And Lindsay Baines were kind enough to allow me to use their ramp at work, so I could do a lot of work after hours and on the weekends, and that allowed me to really get my hands into a car like the Alfa. And it was a really tough car to work because it was a boxer engine and it had inbound brakes, so to change a disc you literally had to drop the engine on the car. So it was quite a challenging car, but never look back. Got another question from someone whose name I did not put down for any reason, but you'll know your question. So he says, or she says, what are you doing with all these cars? It's something that I've always wanted to do for years, but I've never been in the right financial situation to do so. I'm just wondering how you manage to do it, like financially and time-wise. What is your profession, and what does your neighbours think? Or are you working on cars all the time? Brett, that's who asked that question, Brett. I have, I guess, put some savings aside, and like I said, over the last 10 years I've had sort of second cars that I've always been able to use, and the straight cars I've been able to sell and make some decent money, and really that's what I've been using to fund this. I try not to spend additional monies on this, so I try to make this self-funding, but every now and again I do have to do a bit of a top-up with savings. And to be fair, the YouTube ad revenue, that does help. It keeps the channel flowing, and that's the reason why all YouTubers will tell you to click on that notification bell, because we get ad revenue, and that really does help with funding the cars and the projects and the bits and pieces, and also sponsors as well, who contribute tools like Tool Maniac, and they've been a great sponsor, and others who've sent radios and other bits as well. So those are the kind of things that help financially, because running a YouTube channel isn't cheap. It is quite expensive, and that's why most YouTubers will have merch shops, etc., because it all helps to fund the channels and keep you guys entertained. So that's what I've been able to do, and that's how we pay for, and that's how I pay for my projects. Oh, and the neighbour thing, I try to be kind to my neighbours, so I don't tend to work on the cars outside of my garage. When I bought my house, I actually extended my garage so that I could do a lot of the work inside the garage. I live in a cul-de-sac, and it's got a number of old people, and I'm very friendly to them, and they're very friendly back to me. And I always ask them if they find it a hassle, and none of them have ever complained. But like I said, I do try to be respectful and not do sort of stripping the cars out in my yard. I did for the Fiesta, but because I had another car in the garage that I couldn't move. But for any other products that I get, I tend to do them in the garage, and then I bring them out once the cars look decent. So to my neighbours, this looks like I've got a lot of nice cars, and they like that. Question from Scotty Slick Auto Restores. Do you find it harder to sell cars that have been written off than cars with clean history? Short answer, yes. It's much harder to sell cars that are written off because people are very dubious about it. They still remind themselves of the days when you had to cut and shuts, that's two cars welded together. That doesn't exist anymore. So people are a little bit weary of that. So whereas, like I said earlier, my A4 sold in a week, and I got the price that I wanted as well, and it was bought from a dealer. So goes to show. So Resurrect Autos UK, his question: how much time do you spend a week in hours on your cars? So I try to spend around 8 hours over the weekend. So what I'll do is I'll spend sort of 4 hours on a Saturday and then 4 hours on a Sunday. on actually working on the cars, and that way I got time for my family and we can do other things rather than me spending all weekend working on the cars. The flip side of that means that it takes longer to do anything, because during the week when I come home from work I don't get home to around sort of 6, half 6, because I work about an hour away on the motorway. So it's only the weekends and perhaps some public holidays I spend on the vehicles, but it's that sort of work-life balance. I need to spend time with my family, and I make a point of doing that every weekend. So it's about 8 hours over the 2 days. Okay, 2 more questions. So Danny Brim asks, hi Paul, enjoy the channel. Do you ever buy stolen recovered cars, and are they worth buying? Many thanks, Danny. Yes, I do. So my Audi TT, the white TT, that was a stolen recovered car. It was absolutely fine. Served me well for the time that I had it. Missed that car. It was a really good car. And I may be in the process of buying another recovered car. But are they worth buying? Most certainly are. But beware. Stolen recovered cars means that you're competing with people who want a car, they're looking for the same car, so you tend to find that those cars go for higher value because they have no history. So just be careful, don't get into a bidding war over those cars. Bid shrewdly and then you'll be fine. So final question from Sideshow Bob. Basically tell us your life story, up to date, parents growing up, first job, etc, etc. So my parents are from the Caribbean. My dad was in America. I got brothers and sisters in America. I kind of was born in London. I now live in Dorset. What more do you want? My first job, and this is how I got into IT. So my first job was in Marks and Spencer. So I trained to be a mechanic, and I was doing an apprenticeship at Lindsay Baines. And at the time, to fund my apprenticeship, because you didn't get much money, I also worked early mornings at Marks and Spencer's, and they had a computer system that controlled their tills, and they wanted someone to start it up in the morning. So me here, who used to start at 5 a.m, used to fire up this computer, and it used to take about an hour to boot up, and then it will have all sorts of issues. So I'd be on the phone desk to the help desk trying to resolve it. And I got pretty good at fixing this computer system to the point that I never used to phone the help desk. And then they asked me to work in their head office in London, named Baker Street, and the rest is history. That's how I got into IT. And then I met my beautiful wife, moved down south to Dorset, and I've been here ever since. So that is my life story up until now. Okay, so that is it for this week. I hope you've enjoyed that Q&A. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and see if we can do another one sometime next year if you found this interesting. So next week we continue with actually we don't, we got something slightly different, because I'm going to reveal something next week. So you might have seen in the comments something exciting happened today, and it did. I'm not going to tell you until next week. So next week you'll find out what that exciting is. And I know you're going to be speculating, no, I haven't bought an R8, or have I even bought a car? Figure out see if you can figure out what it is. I might leave some clues. In fact, I will leave some clues. But in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe down here and click on that notification bell every time you see our videos. So have a good rest of the week, and we will see you on Monday.